Okay, good evening. This is Justin Lee. I'm the Director of Elections here in the Lieutenant Governor's Office. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second public meeting via a webinar for the Erda Incorporation Feasibility Study. I'd like to thank everybody who jumped on tonight. And again, apologize like I did last week. We're not able to do this in person. We're living in extraordinary and unprecedented times here where we're all suddenly trying to figure out how to do things via video conference and webinars and trying to stay safe and separate from one another. So we appreciate everybody accommodating as we try to do this through this webinar. I'll set a couple of ground rules for tonight and maybe go through the agenda first, what our plan is. First, we'll have Susie here. She's going to present the actual feasibility study. If you have questions, there's a chat function where you can type in the questions. There's also an opportunity we can unmute you and you can ask the question, but the chat seems to work well. Our request is that you please identify yourself and let us know whether or not you're an Erda resident or representing somebody else. If we were doing this in person, we would have a better idea of this. But because of the kind of anonymous nature of the webinar, we're going to rely on you to identify yourselves, and that'll help everybody know where the questions are coming from or the clarification is coming from. Would also like to say, just kind of as a preface, that a feasibility study contains a lot of estimates. It's a study. It looks at some different data points, but it should not be taken as either a crystal ball predicting exactly what's going to happen in the future, or a plan that the future city, should the city incorporate, has to follow. This takes some parameters that are set forth in the law and looks at them and decides whether or not certain things are feasible, certain things make sense, what some possibilities are, but no one should take this as exactly what will definitively happen in the future if there is an incorporation. So I think with that preface, I'll turn the time to Susie.
Great, thanks, Justin. I hope that everyone out there is staying well and keeping healthy, and grateful that you chose to be part of this presentation and discussion this evening. So we're going to go through the same PowerPoint slides that we went through last week and explain these, and then we'll take some questions at the end of that. So first of all, in terms of this process, so we can get these slides to move here. There we go. Oops, and then now it's working. There we go. Okay, so the first slide here, the incorporation petition was originally received by Tualatin County. It had to have so many signers representing so much proportion of the county, and then it had to be reviewed and certified by them. On October 7th, 2019, the Lieutenant Governor's Office hired Zions Bank Public Finance as the consultant for the Erda Incorporation Feasibility Study. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about our experience. We are part of the municipal consulting group at Zions Bank. We do lots and lots of studies for people, for communities such as cities, counties, special districts. We have done lots of incorporation studies, annexation feasibility studies, which are also similar. And we're just hired to be a third-party, independent, objective consultant to look at this, to just provide you with some information as you make your decision. We have done studies where our communities have chosen to incorporate, and we have done ones where they have chosen not to. Going way back to Marriott Slaterville, we've done Hooper, Mill Creek, those are some who just chose to go forward. Others, such as the Warren Reese area, College Young up in Cache County, West Mountain down in Utah County, decided not to go forward. So we really tried to just give you good information in accordance with the requirements of Utah law as you make your decision. Well, this incorporation feasibility study was due on January 4th. We really completed it pretty much before the Christmas holidays there. And then these two public hearings are being held according to the requirements of law on March 23rd last week and tonight on March 30th. A little bit more. Okay, I'm going to talk really loudly. I don't know if we can turn my microphone up or right in here, but let's see. Is there anything to do that?
No, I think that's the lottery.
Okay. Now, okay, there we go. So here's a map of the Incorporation Study area. We have been asked by several people, can we change the boundaries? Our assignment is just to provide an Incorporation Feasibility Study with the boundaries that are given to us by the Lieutenant Governor's Office, which has reviewed what was provided to them by the petitioners and Tooele County. So we follow very carefully Utah code requirements, and which is a study completed by a third-party independent consultant as required by law. We have the 90-day time frame that we mentioned. Then the study has just a few major parts to it. It has socio-economic analysis. You'll see in a minute. We'll look at population, growth, the type of economic base makeup of the community. And then it has really two major fiscal impact sections. One is what would it cost the residents of Erda if they were to incorporate as a city? What would be a budget for the proposed city? What would the revenues be and the expenses? And where there's a gap, how much more would that cost those residents? And then we also need to look at the tax impacts on the current service providers. If the new residents of the city were to choose to obtain services from different service providers than they now, from which they now receive them, then that would be a loss perhaps to those who are currently providing those services. And we'll look at what those fiscal impacts will be as part of the study in a few minutes here as well. So let's start with some of the socioeconomic analysis. First, we looked at what were the historic residential building permits and commercial. We looked in that in the area as well. You've got about an average of 39 residential permits per year, really less than 3 on the commercial side. Now, there may be plans for large industrial development, other types of development in the area, but we have based this entirely on what had historically happened in the past 4 or 5 years, and then using that to project forward for the next 4 to 5 years. You can see that your population is about 3,000. And there were questions last time, what does that really compare to? You're pretty similar to Beaver. Beaver has about 3,000, Fillmore has about 2,500 people in it. So that gives you a little perspective on the size of the population on this area. The area is largely residential and agricultural in its makeup. There are 29 businesses listed there currently with the State Tax Commission. The area covers 43.27 square miles, and we have large areas of vacant land. What is interesting about this area on this slide is when we look at the taxable value, which was provided by the Tooele County Assessor's Office, and we look at the population of nearly 3,000, our taxable value per capita is relatively high when we compare the taxable value in Tooele City, Grantsville, and Tooele County. That is going to give us a bit more revenue per capita when we look at establishing some revenues and expenses for the new city. So where does that $285 million come from? Well, property tax is made up of 3 components. We have real property, which is land and buildings. We have personal property, which is equipment, machinery for businesses, that type of thing. And then there's a little bit of centrally assessed, which are things like utilities, rail lines, things that cross boundaries. And those are provided, those are centrally assessed and then provided to the local areas what their proportion would be. And as we look at major revenue sources, property tax is obviously a major source. For the new city, another major revenue source would be sales tax, which would come from population distribution. Last year, we had about $100 per capita, and the point of sale distribution from local businesses is really only about $124,000 per year. A lot of cities get a lot of revenue from the municipal energy, sometimes called the franchise tax. None is projected for this area, although if the area were to choose to incorporate, a new city council could choose to enact up to 6% on the taxable portions of your electric utility, you get electric and gas bills. None is projected because you're not now paying any. Counties cannot enact this, and so none has been projected as part of this, part of our study, in order to keep things similar in the future as with the past. And then another major source of revenue comes from Class C, the road fund distribution, and you have about 216 weighted road miles. That may seem like a lot of road miles, but you have to realize weighted road miles are 5 times the regular miles that are paved. So you don't have quite that many actual miles of roads, but you do, for the purpose of distributing Class C road funds, you have about 215 miles. So let's look at what the proposed revenue might be for the new city. We have to do by law, do a budget going out 5 years. The major sources are property tax that we just talked about, and we've multiplied this year by the rate that you're currently paying to the county for municipal services only, not for the county's general fund. The other major source would be sales tax, and as we mentioned a minute ago, you have that population distribution of about $100 per person and the point of sale of $124,000. You'll see some things under licenses and permits. That is, you have growth in the area. You do collect building permits, but you also would have some offsetting expenses with building inspections and engineering, that type of thing. But the other major revenue source are your road funds down at the bottom, where you would get revenues from both the road miles and based on a population distribution. And to get total revenues, we estimate of about 1.1 million to 1.2 million per year for the new city. So then we need to look at expenses, and we have to follow the Utah Code very carefully. In fact, every chapter of our study responds to every single different requirement in the code. And one of them regarding expenses says that the feasibility consultant shall assume the proposed municipality will provide a level and quality of municipal services that are provided to the area of the proposed municipality at the time the feasibility consultant conducts the feasibility study. So what that means is, when we're looking at the costs here in a minute, so like your police or your roads, we are just going to measure the cost to provide the same level of service you're now getting. If you have one patrol car in your area, we're not going to measure two. Now, you may think you want a higher level, and a new city could do that, but that's outside the scope of our study. The same for road repairs. That's the one I always hear. We need more done on our roads. But for the purposes of the study, we're just measuring the level of service that you're now getting. So let's set up a budget here for this new city. First of all, the recorder and the treasurer are required by law. So we have built those into the budget that you'll see on the next page. We have allocated many where you could contract for services, or you could provide them yourselves. For most new cities, it's usually less expensive to just contract for services and not have to deal with all of the upfront capital costs like with police or the public works department. And then over time, some cities choose to provide those services themselves. So in terms of public safety, we had an estimate provided from a couple of sources. These costs here reflect what was provided by Tooele County, and there is documentation in the study from Tooele County regarding the potential cost of continuing to provide services to Erda for public safety at the same level of service you're now getting. It's pretty low per capita. You do not have a lot of calls for service as we looked at these numbers, and pretty peaceful community there. When we look at roads, we also got an estimate from the county on this, and here's your average. I think where we've highlighted here, the cost per weighted road mile, it's bolded, that fourth line up from the bottom. And you can see that you're getting about $1,056 per weighted road mile. What's interesting to me on this table is that all of those in the 4 right-hand columns, Erda, Stockton, Rush Valley, and Vernon, are relatively low cost per weighted road mile, which reflects, the level of service that you have chosen to provide and to pay for at this point in time. There's a great difference in cities in terms of, what's their level of snow plowing, what's their level of providing other repair and maintenance services for roads. So let's put all of these projections here into a budget. We've got, you can see the general government category, the different, as we talked about, we needed to have a recorder and a finance person. That assumes $50,000 a year plus benefits, and that's $66,500. A mayor and council could certainly do it for free for a few years. We have not assumed that. We've seen that happen in a couple of startup cities, but we have put their costs in. There are legal costs every year, what we see in other cities, and additional legal in the initial year startup costs at the bottom of the spreadsheet here. We've just brought in for public safety, we have brought in police, animal control, and dispatch as provided by the county. The same on the streets and public improvements. One other comment from a question I was asked last time, building and utilities. We assumed that you would likely rent space from some either office building, some government entity, and we have allocated $15,000 a year for your building space needs on that. So when we look at these numbers, it's about a break even is really what it is here. The revenues and expenses, they just about offset each other. You know, they're estimates. Certainly there could be other conditions, other needs that come up, or things that are, like we said, the mayor and council may choose to donate time for a few years. So this could go either way, but this is the range that we feel it's just about a break even between the two. And I have to tell you that I was surprised when I saw this. My initial thought in doing this would be that it wouldn't break even. There weren't a lot of businesses in this area. And I think there really were two driving factors in my mind as I went back through the numbers to say, why is it doing this? Because we've done a lot of these studies. And I think one was that high property tax value per person that we showed you earlier, and then your costs for services for your police and your roads, which usually are the deal breakers. They're really quite low, what the county would do. And I think that is why we were coming out with this break-even situation. So are we in the ballpark? So we look at this next, when we look at the general fund costs per capita, and we compare it with other similar cities, and we've got about $371 per capita, puts you right around where Stockton is, where Blanding is, a little higher than Garland. Really similar to Wilkesville, and of course the other ones you're pretty similar to within Tooele County. And that was kind of a safety net to check, just so for all of us to see how do we compare and how do we stack up. Okay, so now we talked about what the impacts would be to the city budget if you were to potentially create your own city. But what happens to those who are left behind? Well, if you choose to continue contracting with the county for roads and for public safety, the impacts are much less than if you would choose to contract with another source. Grantsville has provided an estimate for public safety protection, which is similar in the appendix to the study. It's obviously not, it's non-binding, you know, at this point, it's just an estimate of what they thought they might be able to do. So you have a couple of different tax districts here, and these ones that are highlighted in gray, all of the areas have, and the two at the bottom are a little bit unique to some areas. Let me show you this map, it's a little easier to see. You can see these different tax areas. Most of you are tax area 10, but there are a few other little tax areas, different tax areas with just a little bit of difference. But it's not going to make any difference to your current water providers, sewer providers. Those would continue whether you incorporate or not. So let's look here at the Special Revenue Fund. This is Fund 11 for the county. And this one, if you were to choose to, let me see, here we go. If we, this one deals with roads, and if you were to choose to, oh, mine is going. You want to check before I go on?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Maybe it's just on one individual's.
Yeah.
You may have hit a button. Is it good? Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. So the roads were not to be provided by the road service by Tooele County. You know, what would be the impact on the county? And basically found that they could be able to reduce expenses some. It was a difficult estimate because you have some fixed costs in place, some supervisors, administrators that were there, whether you have less or more road miles to service. But if we were to take out those costs that are attributable to Erda and assume that 80% of those could be reduced, so you would have reduced revenues of $243,000, reduced expenses of $195,000. So they'd have a net loss of revenue of $48,000, nearly $50,000. So in that case, I mean, a $250,000 primary residence remaining in the rest of the county, not in Erda, could potentially see its taxes go up a little bit for the road fund, Fund 11, and that would be in about the amount of $4 a year. So there's two funds that are impacted in the county. The other one is the Special Revenue Fund 23. This is a fund that provides municipal type services to unincorporated areas of the county. And right now, Erda, if it were to, you would lose the revenues from Erda, which are about $848,000, and the rest of the county had to make up that entire amount. It would be about $69 per 250,000 primary residents. But costs could likely be cut to some extent. And if it were to be in half, that would be about $35. Certainly if the new city, that if it chooses to incorporate or to choose to provide police services, to contract for police services, there would be revenue coming back in to the county for that type of thing. So we estimated about half would be about 35. So the results of the study show that if incorporation is feasible, risks, and we were also asked to identify significant risks and opportunities. So in terms of risk, we said that significant areas, if there were to be significant areas annexed out of the study area, I do have to say though, we did not include dramatic growth projections for some of the planned development in that area. We only based the growth projections in the study on what had happened historically, because by law, we only have a top 5-year time frame, and we really were uncertain that any of that anticipated growth for industrial business park especially would take place. So that is not included in the numbers, and most of that land is now held in greenbelt, so it's showing very little taxable value for the area. Dad, you gotta remember I wrote this in December, and I said, and I think I said this sentence, so there's something of the effect of, this is written in good economic times, but if economic downturns were to occur, we could have decreased sales tax revenues. Wow, what a difference 3 months makes. So there could be some reduced sales tax revenue, to be honest. Other opportunities may exist though. Garbage collection rates may possibly be negotiated at lower rates. Other cities seem a little lower. They may not be able to, but it's been brought up and was noted in the report as some potential there. Reduced rates possibly can be negotiated for other services such as police. We did have some interest expressed by Grantsville at some good rates. We may see significant development taking place near the planned LDS Erda Temple. There also could be additional revenue sources, such as municipal energy taxes. However, that would be additional money out of your pocket. You would pay those monthly with your utility bills. You could charge impact fees, which offset the capital costs associated with new development. And that would be something a new city could charge in order to bring in revenue for new capital facilities for water, sewer, storm, roads, public safety, that type of thing, but only capital costs, not operating from impact fees. Finally, before we have questions, I just wanted to thank everyone. The county was great to provide us information, Grantsville City as well, the Utah State Tax Commission, the petitioners, the Lieutenant Governor's Office. We really appreciate their support in resolving a lot of questions as they came up. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Susie. So we had some questions that were sent in this last week. So we want to run through some of those questions, and then we'll take additional questions as well. So the first question that we received is, how is the city leadership first selected? If the city first votes to incorporate, in the next year after the incorporation takes place, there will be elections held to elect the city leadership. So there would be potentially a primary election and certainly a general election to elect the new city council and mayor. The city council would run for shortened terms so that they would be offset. That's the way all city councils work. So we would have that taking place first. Okay. There we go. I think we had that going through 2 separate mics at once. Let me know if that sounds any better. So there's an election that happens there. So do we have a special election? What happens? Well, let me first maybe just ask the answer the question as to what happens next. The next thing that happens is another petition would have to take place, and that would require more signatures. And once those signatures were gathered, then this would go on an election to be voted on. The question of should the area known as Erda incorporate, and that would take place at a November election, likely at this point. There's not really enough time to put this on the June election, so that would likely happen this November, which means the city leadership would then be selected in 2021 at some point. Likely right in line with the regular municipal election schedule, which means an August primary and a November general election. The only reason I say probably is because you just never know what the legislature is going to do between, now and then. If they change some of those dates, then that could obviously change. So we always want to make sure of that. Let's see the next question, and then Susie, I think this may be a good one. Have you ever seen a city be 100% volunteer? Is the question.
Maybe just leave your mic
Oh.
on.
I should this one on. Should I leave this
Hey,
one? Okay. No, I've never seen a city be 100% volunteer. I mean, you've got public safety, you've got public works, you've got your roads, you've got costs. They're going to be with those people's time that are experienced in those fields, such as public safety. But I have seen it for, several functions. Certainly the mayor and council is one. You might even be able to find it in some of your other people willing to help out with IT, people have expertise. But no, not 100%. Should I turn mine off?
What's the next question? Okay, next question is, what about public works? And I think we hit this one last week, but we'll hit it again. So what about public works? Erda has lots of wells and septic systems that will all need to be eventually updated. So let's take that one first.
Yes, that has been brought up by several people, that some of those are not in great repair. What's the capacity? Frankly, though, in terms of the study, you have those issues with the wells and the septic system, whether or not you incorporate, and that cost is there either way. Incorporating doesn't make any difference in how, you're going to pay for the well one way or another. It doesn't make any difference. And so it's mentioned in a paragraph, noted in the study, but it does not play any role in the fiscal impact numbers.
Someone said, do you really expect people to volunteer?
So someone asked the question, do we really expect people to volunteer?
Well, as you noted in the budget, we did not put in the volunteer time, although we mentioned the mayor and council, and we'd seen it in other places, but that budget assumes no one volunteers.
All right, so the question here is, why is the legal estimate so low? This looks like only a retainer for an attorney. Costs of legal actions against a new city are estimated to me, ? So I know you talked about it a little bit, but let's run over that one again.
Yeah. When you look at the total general fund amount there, we are in line with other cities. Granted, they need some upfront costs for ordinances and those types of things, but we have not seen them higher than what we're showing here in other cities that have successfully incorporated in the past. If this city would have excessive legal actions against it, I guess that would be a different case, but that is outside the scope of our study.
That's sort of talking about the crystal ball aspect. There's no way to know for certain, every single, lawsuit that might be or may be brought against a city. We've seen other cities incorporate recently without significant legal costs. It's impossible to say for certain. So this was the estimate that came through. Let's see, how important is new development for these revenues?
Okay. New development will help you. What we put though in here was very conservative. We only did about 39 residential building permits a year, a little bit of commercial, a little bit over 40, 41, 42 building permits. So the estimates are very low because it was based on what we'd historically been seeing. We knew, as I said, when I presented, that there are some plans within that area, but we only had a 5-year time frame. We didn't know when they would go forward. We didn't want to base the study on something that was we weren't sure of. And so, frankly, it doesn't make a big difference. It's a very conservative estimate of growth at this point. And a lot of that property that you may be thinking, could be developed into business park industrial, that's all in Greenbelt right now. So it made very little difference in the property tax value.
The last one. All right, so this one asks, is 43,000 acres a reasonable landmass to be incorporated with such a small population base and rural income structure?
Okay, so let's go back up to that slide for a minute, right at the beginning. And it's actually 43.27 square miles is what it is. And I don't know that there's anything in the law, anything you've seen, Justin, that says anything about the size, geographic area of a community that it has to be. I think all of our numbers are based more on the revenue that can come out of that area and the expenses.
Yeah, one of the things to note there. So right now, someone asked, "Can you identify people asking the question?" These are questions that were emailed in over the course of the week, so that's why we're just reading them at this point. We will ask people to identify themselves when they send in questions here in a minute. Yeah, I think it's important to remind or at least note, if anyone isn't aware of this, because of when the original request to do a feasibility study was submitted, we're operating under the law as it was prior to May of 2019. For shorthand, we just call it the 2018 law. It was grandfathered in under that structure because of when the original request for the feasibility study was put in place. At that time, there was no calculus at all in the law as to a certain number of people per square mile or anything like that. So really, there's nothing in the law that says 43 square acres is too much or too little for a given number of people. So the people that emailed these questions in were Ron Hatfield and Benjamin Gordon. And yeah, it's good. And we're taking all. It's a public hearing, so we take all questions here. Like I said, if we were doing this in person, we would know who's asking all the questions. So we're just curious as to who's asking them here as well, so that the people that are going to make choice on this can know where questions are coming from. So those are the questions that we had submitted over the course of this past week. But again, happy to take any questions that anyone would like to ask at this point. And while we're waiting on a question, I will also note that this session is being recorded. We had a technical difficulty, failed to record the entire session last time, but it's the same presentation that we did this week that we were doing last week. Most of the questions we just answered are questions that we answered last week as well. And this recording will be publicly available. And just wanted to make sure that we made everyone aware of that. Okay, so Jeff McNeil asked, are the boundaries set in stone as part of what would be vote, or could they be changed before the vote? That's a great question. At this point, there's not really a change in the boundaries that would take place because these boundaries were what was set in the feasibility study. So without basically starting the whole process over, these are the boundaries that would be voted on going forward. Okay, we have Kathleen, and sorry, Kathleen, if I say your last name wrong. Malice from Erda says, since development is based on historical basis, is it reasonable to assume that it is feasible for the potential city to operate well without mass housing development?
Well, that's exactly what the numbers project. It's not based on mass housing development. It is based on what you have seen historically.
Okay, so Jeff McNeil asks, what if Grantsville were to annex some of us before the vote? Would that be legal and possible? That is a great question. One of the, there was a law that was passed this last legislative session that had an immediate effective date that basically says when an area is being considered for incorporation, areas cannot be annexed out of that. There was nothing in that law that grandfathered in things that are already under process. So at this point, it looks like the answer is no, there's no way to annex anything that's a part of the study. Let's see, Craig Smith, Erda resident, says, Tooele City recently lost millions of dollars in a lawsuit with a developer. Is it not likely that a developer may sue over land use decisions just to force a bankruptcy? Craig, that's, I think, going back to what I said earlier, that's kind of part of the crystal ball. We have absolutely no way of predicting whether or not something like that might happen. Let's see, Meredith said, when you say historically, how far back did you look as far as development goes, I think, or anything?
Right, it's about a 5-year look back and a 5-year look forward.
Okay, so Brandon Smith asks, if we get the incorporation on the ballot, does that stop any development projects from moving forward until the vote? Does it tie the county commission's hands in any way? The answer is no. Nothing ties the county commission's hands in any way just because it goes on the ballot. Until the city is fully incorporated, the legal structure remains. See, Craig Smith, Erda resident, if incorporation passes in November 2020, who makes decisions for the city until election officials in 2021? The answer is there is no city until after the election of officers in 2021. Basically, it's still unincorporated area until it's finally certified as a new city once the city officials are elected. And I know that's a weird limbo area, but that's what the law gives us as guidance right now. So the earliest, Jeff McNeil says, so the earliest that could happen is January 2021. Really, no, the earliest the election could possibly happen would actually be August of 2021. The vote to incorporate will not happen prior to November of 2020. And then the next time that something can go on the ballot would be August of 2021. If it's necessary to hold a primary election, because we have more than 2 people per open seat that want to hold office, then there would be a primary election in August of 2021 and a final election in November of 2021. So really it's late December, early January 2021 into 2022 that the process is final. So yeah, you're right, Jeff. Yep, 2022. It's a long process. See, Erda resident, would it be unusual if we asked the county commissioners to place a moratorium on any type of development that is not consistent with the existing zoning ordinance of a rural residential 1-acre lots and above? I mean, I guess the answer to that question is, they're your elected officials, so you can ask them anything you like. There's nothing normal or abnormal about asking something like that to the county commission, and nothing in the law that really would dictate anything about that. So Meredith asked, how is the form of government decided if incorporation passes? Is that voted on along with incorporation? If not, can it be? Yes, it actually is. There's a couple of different options for form of government. All of them involve a mayor and a council. It's just a different question of how the power is allocated, basically. But that question goes on the ballot with incorporation is all. Would you like to incorporate? And then which one of these forms of government would you like to have? Craig Smith says, in the road proposal from Tooele County will provide snow removal, signage, pothole repair, but will not do general maintenance, chip seal, crack seal, and relying on asphalt, question mark.
Let's look at their letter.
And Susie's pulling up that letter right now.
So let me direct you to the letter, Craig, that's in Appendix B, Tooele County Public Works Estimate. It's provided by their Road Department Director. And it begins, Tooele County has been requested to provide you with a current level of service for the roads included in the proposed Erda City Incorporation. County will provide a cost estimate for an annual contract to provide this roadway maintenance. And then it goes through in a lot of detail without reading all 2 pages. It goes on and it talks there about what their cost would be. And it does actually say, actually here it mentions chip seal costs at the level the county provides currently would be approximately $1.35 per square yard or $20,000 per centerline mile every 10 years. Camptrolla County proposes to perform the same level of routine road maintenance as is currently being done. For the annual cost of $5,400 per center line mile of road would include snow removal, sign maintenance, weed mowing or spraying, pothole repair and patching, and striping. And he also talks about the cost for rehabilitation. Asphalt overlays or reconstruction would not be included in the annual cost above, but would be calculated on a project-specific basis. And the chip seal cost would then be at that level. So there's your answer.
Okay, Jeff McNeil says, since the cost would be up in the air at the, so the cost of the new government would be up in the air at the time of incorporation. Thanks, Jeff. I was just going to ask you that. Would be up in the air at the time of incorporation. Who would decide salaries, etc., and when? Right when the new city council and mayor go into place, that would be some of the very first things they would need to decide. What would salaries look like, etc. So that would be the new government who would decide that. So Erda resident asks, of the 29 businesses mentioned in the study, how many actually collect sales tax revenue?
So we have, that's a confidential list of businesses provided by the State Tax Commission. Some can collect significantly more than others, but all were listed as reporting to the State Tax Commission and all had some revenue. We cannot disclose those, it's confidential information. We have that in a backup file. But all 29 businesses, those were provided directly by state tax. And there was a great discrepancy between them, you know, what some collect compared to others.
Okay, this question, I am concerned these meetings were not properly noticed. The public following state statute 10-2A2073A little I. Well, we certainly found ourselves in a strange situation with the COVID-19 outbreak. We had obviously done the noticing for the public hearings, the in-person public hearings, and then based on the governor's directive, could obviously not hold something like that. So we put notices out in the newspaper, on the public notice website, obviously on our website, and at the school where we previously planned to hold the meetings. And these meetings will all be available to anybody to listen to as they're out there. So we realize these are, you know, certainly an unusual time, but complied, you know, working with our attorneys and with the governor's office as best we could under these circumstances. So 29 businesses in the potential new area collect sales tax. Did I hear that right? I can think of only about 6. I think it's the same answer that was just given. These are based on the records from the tax commission, and those were given confidentially, and not all of it can be released.
Right, and they were reviewed by one of the top county officials with us. So we do have their backup on that as well, as reviewed those in our office. But actually with a similar question, they wanted to be assured of that as well.
So Jeff asked, can the name and type of businesses be released? And the answer is no. Based on the information and how it was given from the tax commission, that's not information that can be released. So the question from Bob says, without specifics, are any of the tax revenue sources derived from airport operations?
I don't recall right off, but I don't think so.
Okay, so yeah,
I don't know. I
doesn't
don't have that list.
don't recall right off, but don't think so.
We can certainly look into that. But I don't know the, yeah.
Okay, so Craig Smith says, police estimate from the county was 302,000 plus, but not broken down. Grantsville estimate was 400,000 with a clause that we would have less service and slower response times. Is the lower estimate realistic, and shouldn't we be budgeting on the higher side?
Well, let's look at it. You know, the county provided it based on the level of service they're now providing. That's what they see that it cost them to do that. Now, the Grantsville one talks about with 2 officers, 3 officers, or 4 officers. The $400,000 one is with the 4 officers. The 2 officers is 252,000. The 3 officers is 364,000 for year 1. That includes initial startup costs for each of those as well. So you take away, there's 38,000 for 2 officers, 57,000 for 3 and 4 officers would be 76,000. So the yearly costs after the initial year really come down to 214,000 for 2 officers, according to Grantsville, 310,000 for 3 officers after you do the initial year from Grantsville, and 406,000 for 4 officers from Grantsville. So let's just go to that page where we've got, if I can get this to move. So our police costs are estimated at about $300,000 per year from Tualatin County compared to Grantsville. They're at about $300,000 a year with 3 officers after the initial year.
So see, there's a comment, we share 4 sheriffs now and 1 is with Wendover. And then a question from Jeff, could either Grantsville or Tualatin County back out of their offer when we actually would need them? Is their offer binding?
No, it's a non-binding estimate at this point in time.
All right, so the question was, do we know what Bill 2020 explains the annexation versus incorporation? And that is House Bill 393, run by Representative Waldrop. So if you go to the legislature's website, le.utah.gov, I'm going to type it in there. You can look up HB 393, and that will walk that through. And again, there's an immediate effective date on that one with the signature of the governor. Craig Smith asks, with garbage collection being so spread out, is it not likely collection would cost more, not less?
I don't see why it would cost any more than what you're now paying if it's spread out. I mean, if your garbage collection costs were to go up, it would just go up whether you incorporate or not, it would seem. I don't see what incorporation has to do with changing your garbage cost because it's spread out, increasing it. I'm not sure I understand that question.
So Jeff McNeil asks, so in 2 years, it could be more and likely would. Does the estimate account for inflation? Likewise with the other costs?
Yes, inflation's built into all of the costs. And that's described in the study.
So yes, inflation is built into the costs. Erda resident asks then, why was garbage collection even brought up in the study?
Because in the study, the Utah Code asks you to describe risks and opportunities. And as we visited with people in the county, with the petitioners, with service providers, we said, what are some risks and opportunities that you see? We just wanted to make sure it was all inclusive, that we didn't look or feel like we had, we were trying to favor one, to incorporate or not to incorporate. We just wanted to lay everything out there for you to review. And so in that chapter, where we just have a little paragraph on it, and we don't include that in your revenues in the spreadsheet, but we just mentioned that may be something that could be a possibility. You may want to look at it. It may not work out. That's really all that it says.
So there's a potential for negotiating a different cost for garbage collection, but no guarantees or having that really built into the estimates either.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to make a call for any final questions. We'll hold this line open for a couple of minutes if anybody has. Oh, there we go. We got some more questions right there. So Craig Smith asks, is the risks and opportunities the temple with townhomes and condos is a benefit?
Sorry, try that one again. I was
So,
looking at this other one.
Sure. In the risks and opportunities, the temple with townhomes and condos is a benefit? ? From a fiscal perspective, it could be a benefit.
Yeah, it could. It's not factored into any of the numbers at this point in time. As we've said, we've only used the past historic and the projected based on the past 5 years, but it certainly generally in most fiscal impacts, growth helps communities.
So, and again, when we're talking benefits here, we're just talking strictly financial benefits, fiscal benefits. We're not talking
Right.
way of life or anything. We're just saying this would bring in more income to the city.
Exactly. Good clarification.
Let's see. Jeff says, I see the inflation factor after year 0, but it was figured into year 0 being 2 years from now.
No, it was not figured into year zero being 2 years from now. It was taking up from today on out. So you can see your numbers, because you have to start with the cost they're providing today, and then we just project it out for 5 years from today, according to the code.
So under the code, yeah, we're looking 5 years from today, not from the start of when the city would incorporate. So Bob asked, could special improvement districts be implemented around the temple construction area in order to entice targeted businesses?
Well, I assume you're talking about special assessment areas, really outside the scope of this study, but yes, sometimes developers, choose to do that in order to be able to put in some of their infrastructure. You may also be talking about tax increment areas, RDA areas. I think that's probably what you mean, community reinvestment areas, or some of the tax increment generated in the area could be put back into that project area in order to help pay for some of the infrastructure, to entice a business with incentives, that type of thing. So both of those economic tools are possible to be used.
Brandon Smith asks, is anyone at the state level talking about the fact we have multiple stoplights with 60-mile-per-hour speed limits, people going 70 plus through the lights on State Road 36? I don't know if anyone at the state level is talking about the fact, but it's not something that comes into the study or what we're looking at. And someone says revenue opportunity for the police. And I think that's funny. Okay, so Brian Coulter asks, what federal land use laws will affect how we zone Erda? If we don't follow them, will we lose federal tax dollars? Brian, that's a great question, and to which we don't have a great answer. I honestly, none of us really operate with federal land use laws. So I'll find out where a good place to get that question answered is. But I right now don't know what the answer to that one would be at all. Yeah, if Brian, if you send us an email, we can follow up on that one. We're going to put the email into the chat here. How would current zoning remain in place for the new city? How would it be changed?
Well, it would be up to the city. The new city council can make their own decisions. Those you elect as your representatives could make those decisions. So
there's nothing that says what would happen once the new city is put in place, if it were to be put in place. There'd be a lot of really busy, great discussions at city council meetings. Can a new city actually stop all rezone requests? I guess is the question. I mean, a city, I mean, as far as I understand, they have the zoning authority, so they can do what they want to. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of land use questions there, but there's nothing that really stops a city beyond, a taking perhaps from rezoning or looking at zoning. And again, I want to make sure that, we're in no way serving as, as attorneys for a new city. We're here to talk about the feasibility, not all the net potential legal issues that you could run into. And again, who knows what the law says in a couple of years. So we can't say definitively this is what would happen one way or the other. So yeah, let's back up here. So Bob asked, who determines opportunity zones for tax preferential treatment? I know the feds do, but can a city do that as well? And are there state allies in that effort?
No, the opportunity zones have already been designated and they are set. So if you do not have one, we don't have one within the Erda Incorporation boundaries, you cannot designate an opportunity zone.
Let's see, Jeff, even cities have to follow state land use laws, is that correct? Yes, everybody has to follow state land use laws, that's correct. State law trumps municipal ordinances and laws. Let's see, one would expect the city to put a planning zoning commission in place. Yes, that is a regular practice we would absolutely expect. Land use seems to be the significant driver of incorporation, so that really needs to be discussed and answered. I guess the question is, discussed and answered in what way? Is Erda resident? in what way does that need to be discussed and answered? Because like I said, there's some questions that, we would not be in a position to answer as far as, the entire legal body of land use law.
Well, we don't know what a new city council, what policies they would, those who would elect, what they would enact as well. So we have just gone on base what we've seen historically to project it into the future as the safest course to take.
So just that can rezones really be stopped? And like we said, a new city council could zone the city, within whatever legal parameters are, how they want to. I mean, that would be a thing that the city council can do. Zoning is a vested right. Your comment about the city council doing what it wants is incorrect.
I think to some extent once you have some zoning, you can have a taking from that. But there's a lot of unzoned areas where they would have some discretion.
Now, again, I want to clarify a few things. All of this is,
Yeah,
again, we're not land use attorneys, and our job's not to give you guidance on all land use.
that's right.
Within the parameters of state law, within the parameters of constitutional law, the city council has some zoning authority. We're not saying they can do everything. And so, I'm pulling back and say they can do whatever they want. But this is the kind of thing that would fall to a city council to work out. They have zoning authority. Do cities have to have high density and low income areas? Answer is no. So yeah, Mike, ultimately zoning rolls up to state law. That's true. There's state laws that control zoning. City council is the one that makes a lot of those zoning decisions under state law. And I can say under state law a lot of times if you want. Is the only government option for a new city a mayor and council? I believe so, yes. A mayor and council form of government is what is in place for municipalities. There's some, and again, I'm not an expert in how the cities get put up. We run the elections for cities. We don't we don't really run them once they get into place. So there's some variations between, the mayor council forms of government, but there is a mayor and a council. So the question is, are local zoning can be overridden at the state level? I think the confusion there is state law would dictate how zoning works. So again, city council has powers to do zoning, but there are state laws that regulate that. So cities, and this is true across the board. I mean, cities don't just get to do whatever they want. There's state laws and regulations that dictate a lot of the parameters around that. Let's see. If the necessary services were not provided by an outside source, then the city would be forced to create their own, like police, etc. Is that correct?
Well, you've got to provide those municipal services somehow. I will say that Grantsville did seem eager in providing its estimate to us, but it is non-binding.
Let's see. Erda resident says at 5,000 citizens, you have to allow for various density requirements, state law for those asking. Thanks, Erda resident. You sound like a land use attorney.
We're only at 3,000, and we have 5 years on this study.
Okay, so Donna, who decides the number of council seats? Is that part of the voting process in November? The different forms of government lays out, different forms of municipal government lay that out. And as we got closer, that's something that we would put out there. So Jay says, so while Utah law requires cities with populations over 5,000 to prepare a moderate income housing plan, in the near term, Erda City will have to prepare such a plan, which will require Erda City to allow the construction of moderate income housing. Sites 10-9A-401 through 403. What are the population estimates that we're at right now?
Yes, they were only at 3,000, and our study's only going out for 5 years. So within the confines of this study, the answer is no. In the 5-year time frame, you do not have to do that. We'll go back to these population estimates and show you some of these.
And again, I apologize for some of our ignorance. We're not land use attorneys. We're presenting this feasibility study, although I know that the land use questions and zoning are big ones.
There you go. You're only about 3,400 by 2023.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I'm going to leave it open here for a minute or so more. We'll wrap this up, but we'll wait for a minute here if there are additional questions. And while we're waiting, I'll also say if you have additional questions, feel free to send those to the email annexations@utah.gov. We'll put that in the string again, and then we can answer those questions as needed also. Okay, just to be clear, Erda resident is not a land use attorney, nor the one who brought the 5,000 number, but I think getting info from one would be very good. If the county approves the temple plans and 400 plus homes, will we not likely be over 5,000? There's a potential for that, but again, we don't have a crystal ball and can't say whether or not that would happen. Sure, that's a possibility, but it's not really in there. How do we get a copy of this recording? That's a great question. It will be posted on our website, municert.utah.gov. We're putting that in the chat here as well. And as always, feel free to reach out to us on the email, and we can send that to anybody if you can't find it other places. Thanks for letting us ask so many questions. You're welcome. That's why we do these, so we're grateful you do. And yeah, thank you all for attending the online meeting. We know it's a weird situation, and we hope everyone's staying safe and healthy out there. Okay, thank you all. Have a good evening.